This session is on rewards and motivation. In this session we will discuss the different types of rewards and reflect on what motivates different people. It's really important that we understand what motivates ourselves before we can actually understand and find ways to motivate other people. We will also discuss the different types of reward systems and organisations, and also explain how those reward systems contribute to achieving the organisational goals. A key aspect with successful reward management systems is to provide an alignment between the reward system and the strategy within the organisation. So if, for example, if you're perhaps Google and your human capital, the people within your organisation, those knowledge workers are particularly important, then it may mean that you offer different reward type strategies. So perhaps more generous benefits, flexible benefits perhaps, might be part of the reward management system. However, in comparison, if you're perhaps looking at more of a low cost strategy for the likes of Kmart, you might offer more simplistic type rewards, and we'll talk about some of those shortly. So what I want you to do firstly is to take a moment to think about what motivates you. Think about what motivated you to come to class today, or at least listen to this online lecture. What motivates you to go to work? So often there's a tendency to motivate others in the way in which we ourselves are motivated. It's also important to note though that your motivation style may not be the same as your colleagues. So as a manager, it's a good idea to find out how individuals in your organisation are motivated. When we talk about motivation and rewards, motivation is ultimately a force that energizes you to do something. Some of the key words involved with motivation is the intensity, the level of persistence that help you to carry out a particular task. So motivation is definitely influences your behaviour and your attitudes within an organisation. When we talk about the theories of motivation in the next session, we talk about these content or intrinsic theories of motivation, which come from within, versus these process, more extrinsic theories where they're given to you, perhaps by your supervisor, your boss, and these can come in two different forms: tangible in terms of money, and intangible as a result of getting praise. I want you to have a think about intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards, and I want you to list as many rewards as you can for the two categories. So for example, some intrinsic rewards may be autonomy. Maybe the fact that you have a challenging job, that you're able to develop and learn in your role, that you get recognition. It might be self-worth. It might be related to power. It might be related to enjoyment or helping others in your role. Where if we look at extrinsic rewards, then we might be looking at money, that company car or company phone, for example. I want you to also think how you would motivate and reward others, and also list some of the factors that you would need to consider in the workplace when making decisions on what motivation and reward strategies you would use. So for example, you might consider the type of work. Are you looking at a skilled worker, perhaps a professional, an engineer, an accountant, an academic? Or perhaps are you looking at an unskilled, a labourer, for example? The type of work could definitely influence the type of motivation and reward strategies that you use. What is most important for the organisation? Are you wanting to reward input in terms of knowledge and skills, or are you more concerned about the output in terms of productivity or the level of sales? You might also want to consider the type of people, the type of employees that work for you. Is work-life balance important? Is flexibility important in their job? The type of work, is it risky? Does it involve long hours? And also, like I've mentioned, considering the organisational goals and strategy. I also want you to have a think about some of the issues that may arise when deciding on how to motivate people in the workplace. And perhaps you've also experienced this as an employee or perhaps as an employer. So the key here is that not everyone is motivated by the same things. We're all different. And this adds to the complexity of motivation in the workplace. There's also issues to do with fairness and equity and discrimination. And if we are using money to motivate, do we have the resources to do that? Okay, so talking about different types of reward systems in organisations. Now, reward systems are important both from the employer's point of view and the employee's point of view. So the employer needs to make decisions on how to reward, because it's important to, one, align to the organisational goals and objectives, and also to align to the individual employee's motivational style. It's also important from an employee point of view because you want to know how you will be rewarded, because that's naturally going to influence whether you stay with the organisation, how committed you are, how much effort you exert in your job, your level of motivation and level of performance. So ultimately, a good reward system should increase motivation and it should align with the organisational goals. So the first reward system is time. So it's based on employee input, and most of us have generally experienced this type of reward through hourly rate, an annual salary perhaps. It's individual based, it's simple, it's straightforward. You know when to expect it and what to expect. You know the amount that you're going to be paid on a weekly, fortnightly basis. So there's a sense of security that also comes with this reward system. So you know you've got regular repayments for a rent, mortgage and so forth. However, the main disadvantage with this reward system is that it provides little motivation, because you get a set amount regardless of the increased input or output. So it's most suitable, it's often found in white collar work or where it's difficult to measure individual contributions, perhaps manufacturing. So factory work, perhaps a labourer, some professionals. Generally, most organisations will use a time system at least as a base, and then they'll add other types of reward systems. Another type of reward system is called the result-based pay. So we're looking particularly at employee output, looking at the results, looking at what we call piecework or piece rate pay systems. So in terms of some of the advantages, is it can be a large motivator. So commission, sales, means that the more you obviously produce, the increased level of productivity or sales, you obviously get more money. The main disadvantage is how the results are determined, their worth. So it might be fairly easy if you're calculating a number of sales in terms at Toyota, or the number of Big Macs sold at McDonald's. But obviously often work is not always that sort of straightforward, and we can't always quantify that outcome. So it depends a lot on the expectations, the standards, the targets. The targets are not set too high, so that they're difficult to achieve those rewards. So we might see this sort of reward system in sales, telemarketing, real estate. We also might see more of a piecework where you're getting paid for the number of output with a freelance writer in terms of the number of chapters produced, or even with subcontractors in terms of the number of houses that they build, for example. An enterprise reward system is also another option, commonly termed as gain or profit sharing. So this is where you share the financial gain of the organisation with the employees, and it's used to motivate all members of the organisations, or all members of the organisation, And it also helps to build a strong culture. It enhances teamwork, and people are all coming together to work towards that common goal. The disadvantage is that it's very reliant on your colleagues' effort and performance. It's also reliant on the organisational policies, the organisational strategy, and there's also a lot of uncertain entities as well. So the uncertainty of the business environment, the uncertainty of the industry competitors and so forth will naturally influence the amount you receive as a reward. There are sort of other options in terms of stock options. A lot of IT companies are using this as a reward system. Facebook, Apple, Google, Nike, Starbucks, and so forth. Profit sharing is primarily used in professional organisations, lawyers, engineers, accountancy. Performance-based pay is also another option, and this is also linked to performance management. It's very common in the public sector. You're basically using the time reward system plus a performance base. So the main objective is it links the rewards to performance. To performance is the focus. It's more individually focused, and it's usually rewarded at the individual level. So it may not be appropriate if you're trying to enhance a teamwork type environment. Performance measures can also be difficult to measure. So in services, customer services, you may not always be rewarded correctly if we're looking at how do we actually quantify customer satisfaction. So we need to make sure that performance measures and standards are what we call SMART, so specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, realistic, timely. Otherwise that's going to actually have the opposite effect and actually going to start to demotivate your employees. So again, all types of organisations and industries may use some sort of performance-based system. Public sector and definitely academics use a performance-based system, reward system. And finally, a reward system based on skills. So you're basically paying for the knowledge and skills, compensating employees for learning specific information, skills, maybe managing a software program, engaging in research and so forth. Maybe rewarding for certain competencies, rewarded for communication, rewarded for teamwork. So it provides an incentive for an employee to learn and apply new skills that would in turn lead to an increased level of productivity and profitability for the organisation. One of the key issues with the system is that you need to ensure that you are paying for a skill that is useful to the organisation. You might see it in accountancy when you get your chartered accountant accreditation, and you also would see it in academia. So with tutors who have a PhD, they ended up being rewarded at a higher level. And there's also flexible benefits. I want you to have a think about some of the flexible benefits that you might be aware of in the workplace. You'll often find that organisations use a combination of the reward systems that we've just discussed. So there's an element of being paid on an hourly rate or perhaps a fortnightly salary. There's obviously going to be some sort of result-based to be rewarded on output, as well as some sort of performance-based pay. A way that organisations start to distinguish themselves and compete and attract those employees of choice is through the likes of flexible benefits. So Google is very famous for their flexible benefits, health insurance, superannuation, the flexible work hours. They offer fantastic catering, ergonomic type offices, a gym at work, and that may attract individuals to want to work in those organisations. The fact that you can have additional time off, that there's childcare facilities, that you get a company car or phone, those are all types of flexible benefits that an organisation could offer as a way to reward and motivate in organisations. Okay, so now there's a small activity. I want you to see what your motivation style is. Like I mentioned at the start of the session, it's really important to be aware of your own motivational style so you can start to understand what motivates you in order to be able to motivate others effectively. So take a few moments. So for each of the 10 questions, you need to choose out of those 3 statements in terms of what is best related to you. So this survey is created by Marcia L. Connor, and the purpose is obviously to identify personal motivational styles. And in terms of what Marcia says about motivation, motivation is the force that draws you to move towards something. It can come from a desire or a curiosity within you, or can be from an external force urging you on. Motivation styles vary for different situations and topics, but nonetheless you draw on them, especially when you try to learn something challenging. If you can recognize your predominant motivational style, you can identify the situations that best suit your needs. Likewise, you can't motivate anyone else. All you can do is invite them to learn. So the column that you end up scoring the highest in is your dominant motivational style. So Marcia breaks down the 3 different styles here: goal orientated, relationship orientated, and learning orientated. Okay, so just want you to maybe reflect on what motivational style you are and maybe how that would influence or impact on how you would deal with situations in the workplace.